glad you're back. Oh my God.
What's happening? How am I in your office?
So much. What do you mean?
I was just in America, and suddenly I'm here.
Shit.
What?
Sorry.
What did you do? What? How are you sorry?
I manifested you.
What?
Yeah, I manifested you. I really missed you, and I wanted you back here, so I asked the universe to put you in this couch across from me so we could do our podcast.
That's not how physics works, Leslie.
What? Isn't it?
No, but I am also confused. I think I'm having a fever dream.
Does that make me your dream girl?
I guess so. I have been thinking about the podcast, so maybe it's just a good thing I'm back.
Yeah, at least you didn't have to fly.
Oh, yeah, the terrible flight. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Welcome back anyway.
Thanks, Leslie. Good to be here.
Welcome to Thriving Between the Lines, the podcast that examines personal development books through the lens of intersectionality, making self-help content more accessible and relatable. I am life coach and brat with a capital B, Leslie Crude Up Via Garcia.
And I'm Meka, now deep fried and smothered in chocolate.
And together, we're not just reading between the lines, we're thriving between the lines. All right, as usual, today we are coming to you from Mianjin, or Brisbane, land of the Yagara and Turrbal people, where sovereignty has never been ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And now, in all seriousness, Meka, I am so glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, I realized while you were away that I really depend on you and your energy and your brain and your enthusiasm to stay motivated to get in here and do the recording and to read through books that I know I'm not going to love.
Aw, thank you.
And I have reached out to the wider community to get some more guests on board, and there are people that I still need to follow up with about that, because I had intended to do all that while you were away, but then I was like, I can't do this without Meka. But now that you're back, I'm going to be reaching out to more people.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I contribute in such ways.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like, do I do much here? But
absolutely.
I am the energy bringer.
You're the resident genius. The resident funny genius.
Lol.
Awesome. So, Meka, what is our book for today?
You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero.
Yes. So, before we go into any great detail about this book, Meka, can you just one line, 2 lines, what is your overall general impression of this book?
I hate it.
That's really cutting to the quick.
It's a little bit just someone's thought process just spewed out onto pages with no real backing or reason for it, just spewing what your brain thinks.
See, I love that you're so open and honest about your opinion about it. And I'll tell you what, I don't disagree with what you've said.
It's just so illogical.
It's one of these books where the author, it's she's so close to getting it right.
Yeah.
Not that I claim to know everything.
Yeah.
But there are some things in here that are really, really helpful, but then...
Well, that's the problem, is she's taking real ideas from psychology or other self-help stuff, but putting a spin on it that actually degrades and makes those ideas destructive. If people follow the way she does it, it's probably not going to work for most people with real problems. Like all pseudoscience. It's very pseudoscience. Like taking the real stuff that people actually research and have peer reviewed and
Yes.
work hard on and spend their lives dedicated to developing. And then she just is like, oh, but also, like, the magic made it happen.
Yeah.
I know people who have got sick and or have died because of these sort of pseudoscience
Yes.
movements.
Yes.
And I just don't have room for that level of bullshit where
Yeah.
it's threatening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you, Meka, because one of the things that's really important to understand about personal development, about self-help as a genre, is that there are some writers who are doing very good, very valuable, very useful work with a good solid backing in science, sociology, psychology, and all of these things. But then there's this whole other dark side to the whole thing that seems to, I mean, it feels like it dominates the genre, but I like to think that there's more of a, the tide is pushing back against that a bit, but it might never go away. So we need to confront these things when we see them. So, think you're ready to dive in, Meka?
Perhaps. I think we need to get some Patreon patrons so that they can pay for my teeth grinding.
Just get on Grindr.
That'll fix everything.
I make jokes. All right, let's dive in.
Let's go.
You Are a Badass. How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life by Jen Sincero. Now, one of the reasons we initially started this podcast, and we even say it in our trailer, is that too often books like this ignore or completely dismiss the role of privilege on success. Everything's like, no, I manifested it. I worked hard for it. It's all about my hard work. This person succeeded and we all have the same 24 hours in the day. So why can't you do what that person did? It's like, it's because we all have different contexts. We all have different access to different resources.
Yep.
And yeah, I think this is one of those books that, again, gets a lot of things right, but then a lot of things very, very wrong.
It's just the classic, to me, example of someone whose filter, their version of life, they just can't see past their filter. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I've seen the world through very different filters at different parts of my life.
And these are issues that kind of color the content of this book throughout. And of course, we're going to talk about some of the real specifics, focusing on three major themes. All right?
Mm-hmm.
One is like perception, including self-perception. Another is the law of attraction.
Yes.
Calm down, Meka. It'll be
I'm
okay.
fine. I'm fine. I can do this.
I believe in you. And another big theme we're going to focus on is money. Okay.
Yes.
These are three things that come up in the book in a lot of interesting ways.
We're not going to add internalized homophobia?
I think that can come along for the ride. All right. So those are the three major themes that we're going to touch on in this book, because of course we can't discuss absolutely everything we think about everything in these books.
I know, right?
Yeah, and I find that so much in my book club as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have a good beefy 2-hour discussion, and at the end it's always, all right, well, we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
It's just how it goes.
I had a
It's just how
page
it
of
goes.
notes before I was a quarter of the way through. Like, we just got to choose some and roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, before we dive into the details about perception, I want to talk about what happened immediately when I opened up this book for the first time. And even before I got to the table of contents, I was greeted with this. And still, after all this time, the sun has never said to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with love like that. It lights up the sky. This is a quote from the poet Rumi. All right, well, let me explain why when I read that, I just had to close the cover again and take a couple of deep breaths. So, beautiful quotes, beautiful writer. Rumi is legendary, but Rumi is one of these people whose quotes, whose wisdoms are often thrown around in the self-help world in a way that's completely absent of the cultural context in which they came from.
Okay.
Rumi was from Afghanistan.
Okay.
Yes, well, with what is now Afghanistan.
Okay.
And I remember being particularly gripey about this back in 2021 when Kabul fell to the Taliban, essentially, and there was a big global outcry in support of like the women of Afghanistan as well. I was joining a lot of the protests here locally, calling for some sort of action to help the people of Afghanistan who were now in yet another crisis, and many of which who were going to need to go other places or come to Australia. And so much of the rhetoric online, especially in, a lot of my online communities are populated by people who are into spirituality, personal development, business, in a way that can be quite toxic.
Yeah.
And from a lot of these communities as well, there was just such, either ambivalence to the situation or just out and out hatred for the possibility that there might be refugees from Afghanistan coming into Australia because, fuck off, we're full. That whole attitude, it's like, shut up, man. And some of these people are the same people who will happily quote Rumi to make themselves seem more aligned spiritually. Rumi, this is a name that fits my brand, so that's just it. I'm just going to take what I like from this culture that I actually can't stand, and I'm going to make it part of my vibe.
No, we like them when they're over there, away from me.
Or when they've been dead for many, many, many years.
I just like to use their culture when it suits me, but also hate them because of that culture.
Yeah, it's not cultural appropriation, it's cultural appreciation of a culture that I just do not appreciate anyway. I'm still in my luteal phase, just for reference.
I'm just in my Meka phase.
You're not feeling very #blessed today?
I'm just always a little over people's bullshit.
Okay.
I am more compassionate at times, but I'm in a lot of pain right now, so I just can't.
Yeah. I can imagine all that flying.
Ugh. It just exacerbated fibro being constantly going and traveling in weird beds. Oh, my travels are so hard. I'm trying not to be that person, but it was partly for work, a lot of what we did, so.
Yeah. All of your genius conventioning, I know it would take a toll on you. But do you understand that this pain is because you haven't properly connected to your source energy?
Yeah, I guess being kind of atheist is probably me rejecting the spirit, the vibration, the great being.
Yeah.
I deserve it.
In chapter 2, where she talks about the G word, G being God, one of the things she writes is, wherever you happen to stand on the God issue, let me just say that this whole improving your life thing is going to be a lot easier if you have an open mind about it. Call it whatever you want. God, goddess, the big guy, the universe, source energy, higher power, the grand poobah, gut, intuition, spirit, the force, the zone, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. Personally, I find the God word to be a tad too loaded. I prefer source energy, the universe, the vortex, spirit, the mother lode. This is where my ADHD just started to get angry. She says, all of which I will use interchangeably throughout this book, FYI. I'm like, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Please just stick to one word, whichever one you like best, and just use that throughout the book.
But confusing people is kind of part of the entire genre. If people feel just slightly not quite understanding it,
Yeah.
you're more likely to just accept what's being said.
Yes. Yes. You know, back in the, middle days of season 1 of our podcast, one of the books we discussed was Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. One of the things we took issue with in that was, in an effort to sound relatable, she swung well into the territory of becoming #relatable.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this book, do you think it's relatable or #relatable?
It reminds me of a youth pastor trying to be relatable to the kids.
Oh, at the end of this first part, which is a couple of chapters long, I wrote, this would resonate with a 13-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. The way she tries not to use too naughtier words, and it's the most vanilla version of a lot of terms and things like that. I'm just like, what are you? I'm not a child.
It's very, hello, fellow children. Sitting backwards in a chair.
Yeah, it's very YouTube algorithm passing language.
Yeah. But one of the reasons that I actually wrote that thing about how this would resonate with a 13-year-old, in a way, I meant it kind of as a compliment. I know it doesn't sound like one, but it breaks down into very simple terms some of the things that make us feel badly about ourselves and why we shouldn't let those things make us feel badly about ourselves.
Yeah.
In chapter 4, she dives into the concept of the ego, right? I'll read some of what she's written here. When I first started getting into self-helpery, fellow kids, there was lots of talk about something called the ego that confused the hell out of me. I always thought that ego was about being conceited and braggy and all. I'm going to talk on and on about how great I am, and then I'm going to show you my muscles. Meanwhile, even though arrogance and conceit, which are different from self-love and confidence, by the way, are part of the ego, they're not, as I later learned, the whole dealio.
Yeah. That is correct.
Yeah. In the self-help / spiritual community, ego is used to refer to the shadow self, or the false self, or the self that's acting like a weenie.
Which is not what it means in psychology.
It's a part of us that's driving the bus when we do things like sabotage our happiness by cheating on our husbands or wives because deep down we don't feel worthy of being loved, or that refuses to follow our hearts and pursue an acting career because we're terrified to be seen for who we really are, or that goes on and on and on about how great we are and shows off our muscles because we're insecure and need lots of outside validation that we're good enough. That was a bit of a mouthful, but okay. And yeah, for a lot of people, the ego can drive us in all sorts of weird directions that aren't actually aligned with our values. It can make us act in ways that can serve to satisfy us on a superficial level, but then it doesn't actually feed us. It's not fulfilling.
I mean, I guess it depends what model you're using the term ego from as well. Like the original Freudian one, the ego is just simply you, our conscious mind, the one that tries to balance all the inputs we're getting from the id and the superego and the world around us. And so, yes, if the information you're getting from all of those things is confusing, your ego may drive you to go in the wrong direction. But I think it's being used in a completely different way, so you just kind of have to say, okay, she's using this as this definition.
Yeah.
And what she has to say, with external and internal validation, that sort of stuff, very important. A very important part of a lot of psychological models and a lot of self-help things. If you keep trying to base like your value on what others think of you, you're never going to win.
Yeah. She goes on to say, in other words, there's more than one way to go on an ego trip. From here on out, I'm going to refer to the ego as the big snooze, or BS for short. I see what you did there. I think it'll be less confusing. Okay, so now you don't want us to be confused. You've already said, I'm going to throw a bunch of different words at you that mean God, just because I feel like it. But now I don't want you to be confused. All right. Plus, I think it's more appropriate since the leading cause of sucking, staying broke, dating morons, uncontrollably crying in public because we hate our lives, is that we haven't yet woken up to how truly powerful we are or to how massively abundant our universe is. Now, I just want to unpack those examples for just a second.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. The leading cause of sucking. In parentheses, staying broke.
Systematic poverty.
Dating morons.
Need to stay in abusive relationships for the sake of security.
Yeah, and morons is technically ableist language too, but whatever.
True.
Uncontrollably crying in public because we hate our lives.
Chronic depression.
No. This is sucking. This is the BS that's making our lives suck. It's the ego. It's all ego. We haven't yet woken up to how truly powerful we are or to how massively abundant our universe is.
I mean, abundant probably depends where you have lived and what opportunities have been around you.
Yeah, your great-grandparents haven't yet woken up to how abundant the universe is and then made decisions based on what they had access to that then contributed to your generational wealth and access to various things and educational systems and yada, 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 yada. Okay, it gets better, Meka.
I wonder what she thinks of all those people in India that she spent time around while she was just a sucky broke chick.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, anyway. Alrighty, so moving forward, the big snooze operates according to your limiting false beliefs. This is the garbage that was stuffed into your subconscious as a kid that doesn't ring true for you, as well as the decisions you've made about yourself that are less than flattering or empowering. Okay. It gets validation from outside sources. I'm doing this to win your love. Your opinion of me is more important than my opinion of me. It's reactive. My circumstances control my life. I am a victim. Fear-based and extremely committed to keeping you safely confined within the reality you've created based on these limiting false beliefs, otherwise known as your comfort zone. There is validity in that.
Yeah.
Hanging out in there,
Yeah.
cuddling up with some other factors. But one reason that this already starts to raise my blood pressure is because when you put this in the context of other things that Jen Sincero has been up to, it's kind of like, lady, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
She's huge in the MLM world. Yeah, which of course banks on the idea that you can just tell people that the reason that you're not making millions of dollars in this opportunity for unlimited income is that it's just your limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
It's no.
And their model doesn't work beyond
No, that's stinker thinking.
unlimited resources. Yeah.
Yes.
Can't believe we haven't outlawed that shit.
You keep trying, but there are too many lobbyists are in the pocket of these things. But that's a whole other discussion. This also has echoes of one of the books that we've talked about on this podcast about a couple of little mice and a couple of tiny people. Which book was that?
Who moved my cheese?
Yeah, Who Moved My Cheese? All about managing your life in in the context of change and how it doesn't matter who moved your cheese. You just go find new cheese. It's like, no. Who moved your cheese actually does matter. And why they keep moving it matters. Anyway, go listen to that episode.
Leslie.
What?
Stop blaming the white people for all your problems. Jesus.
But then I'd have to find a new hobby, Meka. Yeah, I do like to tease my partner with that sort of stuff sometimes. Like, be like, hey, cook those pancakes faster. Black lives matter. Jokes only I can make. It is true that sometimes people's fear of things that aren't necessarily, I don't want to use the word rational, because I feel like that can that can be very invalidating for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, fear of failure, that can stop people in their tracks in ways that are heartbreaking, really.
Yeah.
And it is possible in a lot of these contexts to push through that fear to get to what's on the other side of that fear, even if it's of just hearing no.
Yeah.
Which, fear
I know
rejection.
nothing about.
It's like, okay, well, I feel like a lot of my success in life has been based on inviting the no, inviting the possibility of rejection, and then going, all right, I'm leaning into this, lean into the wind of potential rejection, and then just see what happens when you do get a yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think growing up as a marginalised person has helped you to be more open to the rejection because you grew up being rejected in certain situations?
I think that's part of it. I grew up fluent in that language.
Because I think I recognize that growing up as a white girl in a country where that is basically the closest to privilege as you can get, I could have been male the whole time. I was afraid of hearing no, rejection. I wanted to be just totally accepted because I was so accepted in most of the world.
Yeah.
And, like, not saying that's, like, an excuse, but sometimes the privilege is kind of a toxic, like this toxic part of your life.
Yeah. A lot of my experience with rejection growing up is that growing up as the only black kid in a very white community in a lot of situations meant that sometimes it didn't matter what I did. People were going to be like, now,
Yeah.
seat's taken. And it's like, well, I might as well just keep doing what I know is the right thing to do or what it is I want to do, because damned if I do, damned if I don't. I'm not fighting for acceptance here. I'm just doing my thing and living my life.
Yes.
So, like, as an adult now, if someone goes, no, I'm not going to get all broken up about it, because it's like, okay, I speak this language.
Yeah. I think coming out as trans and openly being visibly different helped me to realize that you don't need that approval.
Yeah.
Because I was just kind of at a breaking point where I was trying so hard to fit in, and I did the whole fem up to fit in thing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I am not happy this way.
Yeah.
I would prefer rejection. And then when I did that, I was like, oh, this is way better.
Yeah.
I would prefer to be rejected by people who don't like me for who I am.
Exactly. When you are loud and proud and authentic, living an authentic life, it's a really good filter for bullshit. The people who want to hang out with you, they will stick by you. They'll be your ride or dies.
Yep.
The people who will only accept you if you change, they'll just not be your problem.
And you
in a lot
identify
of cases.
You identify the energy vampires you had in your life.
Yeah.
Because they never liked you anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also one of my autistic traits growing up, before I had any inkling that I was neurosparkly, is that I've never looked at people in terms of like a hierarchy. Like, oh, I can't, I can't just approach that person with this question because they're too popular, they're too famous, they're too busy. It's like, that person's a human, I'm a human. Logically, if I have a request that I want to make of this human, I approach them and make the request. They may say yes, they may say no. They say no, I move on to the next human. Like, it's not even a thing.
I think my neuro spiciness gave me the rejection-sensitive dysphoria extra hard too.
Yeah. It's interesting the way, like, you can kind of be both things, right? Like, inviting rejection, but then also having, like, a strong visceral reaction against it, but then still, like, knocking down those pegs.
Yeah, it's the classic human experience of living in paradox.
Yeah. And everyone's experience is different. I'm not saying that this is how, we're not saying that this is how every person with ADHD or who's autistic or who has both
or who's
functions.
Black or white.
Yeah. Early on in the book, she starts to vilify the haters. The people who don't want to be your absolute cheerleaders.
Haters gonna hate.
Haters gonna hate. Haters gonna be drinking their haterade. Potato's gonna potate. She says, they may express their discomfort in all sorts of ways. Anger, hurt, bafflement, criticism, snorting every time you talk about your new business or your new friends, constant remarks about how you're not the way you used to be, brow furrowing, worrying, teasing, blocking you from all social media outlets, etc. With a little example here.
I think she meant scoffing, not snorting.
I don't know. The first thing I do when I've got a new business idea is I go to the local farm, find some piggies, and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Absolutely. So she says, Shirley, are you really going to quit your secure corporate job to open a nail salon when you've got 2 children, a mortgage, and high blood pressure? So few new businesses succeed, especially in this economy. Aren't you worried about what will happen to your family if you fail? Of course Shirley is worried about what will happen to her family if she fails. She wakes up every night seized by panic about it, but she's moving past her fear to create something she's really psyched about, rather than dying a slow, painful death hanging around the water cooler with you, whining about how dry the cake was at the birthday party your boss threw for you in the conference room last week.
You know, I am worried, but also, if I fail, my parents will probably come bail me out.
Yeah. So she's showing like respect for these feelings, but then also saying you got to push past them no matter what. And that may seem like a bit of a reach just based on what's here, but when we start talking more in detail about what she says about money, you'll understand like why this pisses me off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like in isolation, it might seem fine. In context, it ain't.
Yeah.
Right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And when we talk about perception, especially of the self, one important aspect of that is self-love. And she does
one of my favorite pastimes. Hey, it's natural and healthy.
That's true. Okay. I'll read one paragraph about the importance and the value of loving yourself, right? On page 54, in the chapter called Love the One You Is.
Okay, that sounds like appropriation language.
Yeah. Okay. Imagine what our world would be like if everyone loved themselves so much that they weren't threatened by other people's opinions or skin colors or sexual preferences or talents or education or possessions or lack of possessions or religious beliefs or customs or their general tendency to just be whoever the hell they are. Imagine how different your reality would be and the reality of everyone surrounding you if you woke up every morning certain of your own lovability and your critically important role on this planet, and if you poo-pooed shame, guilt, self-doubt, and self-loathing and allowed yourself to be, do, and have everything your little heart desired. That's the kind of world I want to live in. When I read this, I thought, okay, this would be a really good way to introduce the need for more social equity, for more social justice, for systemic change that will allow people to feel less threatened by people who have different skin color, different sexual preferences, and things like that, so that we can have the same immediate capacity to love ourselves in a way that will resonate throughout society, because that's the kind of world we want to live in. No, that's not what she's suggesting here. What she is suggesting is toxic positivity.
Yeah.
One of the numbered strategies that she lists here is drown yourself in affirmation.
From yourself or others?
Well, it's the word drowning that I thought was so ironic to use here. Because again, this is the problem with toxic positivity. It gets to a point where something that is positive becomes potentially lethal. It becomes poisonous.
Yeah.
And here, affirmations, she's saying to use them in such a way that you're doing this other lethal thing.
It's the same with so many ideas that get thrown out in these books, that it's just extremes, going to extremes. Like, any one direction is too much.
Yeah.
Like, you're a narcissist if you go too far one way, and you have no self-esteem if you're the other.
Oh, then you're a victim. Then you have a victim mindset.
But also, like, nuance doesn't sell books.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's why I think these things just go too far. And no one wants to read a textbook on actual psychology. They want to read a book that's strong and yummy and just, like, gives you these really easy solutions.
Yeah, and the ironic part is people who do want to read textbooks about psychology have to spend, like, $100 or more on an actual psychology textbook when they could spend $20 on this. And it's like, But anyway, so affirmations. I'm not against affirmations on the whole. What I am against is empty affirmations, platitudes that serve to bypass actual work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Systemically, personally, as well. Some of the examples that she gives here that are specific to self-love are, I deserve and receive massive amounts of love every moment of every day. Okay, cool. My heart is open. Love pours in and out. All right. I am brilliant, bright, and beautiful. Great. I get it. Positive self-talk. That's a thing. But if you're to the point where you have to say these things over and over again in a way that you are drowning yourself and you're struggling to believe these things, there may come a time where you need to get assessed for clinical depression or some other thing that you can't just hashtag live, laugh, love your way through.
Well, you're not actually working on the things that are causing that lack of self-esteem.
Yeah.
You're just trying to think your way out of it, which doesn't work.
Yeah.
There's a difference between actively doing the work and using the affirmations as part of that work.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And
but if I just put putty over the cracks, the foundations are still moving.
Yeah, if you put Band-Aid on a zombie bite, that shit's still going to turn at some stage. But that's a good segue into our discussion about the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. So, Meka, what is your understanding of the law of attraction?
Well, in these self-help type things, it's just this kind of think positive and good things will happen. If you think negative, bad things will happen. Like and it's not even like psychological human to human. It's like the universe, like even things that can't be affected by people's opinions and thoughts, like money or health, things like that. I mean, there's a certain amount your mind affects your health, but
Yeah,
not
yeah.
to the level that they go to.
Yeah. And this is my take on the law of attraction is that I understand the rationale behind trying to think positive thoughts and ask the universe for what it is that you want and attracting those things towards you in a way that will help you focus on those things. But I don't like the whole sit back and wait for it to happen aspect of it. I don't like this idea that you attract everything, including the negative things, because you're vibrating at the wrong frequency.
Yeah.
The way that that sometimes is used, especially against marginalized communities, is extremely dismissive, out and out racist at times, very classist a lot of the time as well. And it can do a lot of damage.
Yeah. That's my issue with it, is when it becomes that level of victim blaming.
Yes.
And that actually brings me to how we got on to doing this book.
Oh, yes.
I met someone
us.
during my travels who has terminal cancer. And we just got talking about life, the meanings, what it is to be a human, all of that deep stuff that comes when you, when the great universe starts looking you in the face.
Yep.
And you really look at your existence. And this came up, that someone in their life suggested that they manifested the cancer because they believed the negative things and that something bad had to happen to them. And that to me is just now at a level of toxicity that's just, I mean, what do you say to that?
I say, F off!
It's just,
That's infuriating.
like, why would you become a doctor or anything if you're just like, well, I'm just becoming a doctor to help these negative people that gave themselves cancer? Like, where do you get the compassion for people when you believe that they have done everything to themselves?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a really good way of not having to worry about the people who aren't doing well in the world, though.
Yeah. It's a
Like-
very convenient place to hide when you have a lot of privilege.
Yeah, like, you need to, when you are sitting there up the top, it's really confronting to see poverty and to see people who are facing just things they never invited into their life
Yeah.
that were given to them. And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's hard to just settle back and enjoy your life
Yeah.
when people are sitting there suffering in your face.
Yeah.
And you need something to calm yourself, to make yourself feel settled and happy. Mm-hmm. And it's a really convenient way to go, well, they did it to themselves.
Yeah. They should have made better choices.
They just, like, choose to not work hard.
Yeah.
They work 3 jobs and only get 4 hours sleep a night, but they don't, like, try hard enough.
Yeah. People don't want to work anymore. Meanwhile, I make my job selling courses on how to make passive income by selling courses about how to make passive income. I make money in my sleep. It's like, okay, so what you're saying is you're lazy. It's like, no, I'm not lazy. It's like, well, then which one is it?
This is the part where I was starting to just grind my teeth. And, like, I had to stop for a while. I just couldn't. I really had to drag my butt through the rest of the book. It frustrates me so much because it's at the root of so many issues in the political realm. Just having talked to a lot of people who have political views far away from my own, there is so much belief that everyone who's not doing as well as them did it to themselves or has chosen not to be wealthy.
Or they're focusing on the wrong story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where taking these things to extremes can be such a huge issue as well. She even says, what you choose to focus on becomes your reality. And she didn't invent this stuff. This is something that is pervasive throughout the self-help world, right? It's like, that's not always the case, bro.
There is a truth to a certain level where you can look at a situation and choose to see the more positive aspect of it, or be more compassionate to yourself or others in that situation.
Yeah.
And that can really help you to face your issues and to face the adversity that you truly do have in the world.
Absolutely.
But that's so different from just ignoring every issue.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like, I'm not saying think positive and you won't have adversity anymore. I'm saying if you think I am valid and worthy and a good person, when you face that adversity, you will have more energy to deal with it and more ability to brush it off.
Yeah, it can be very fortifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the key components of, narrative therapy. And doing narrative work is something that I do a lot of in my coaching. Like, we look at the actual story that you're telling yourself, the story that you're living through, and what we can actually learn from those things to create strategies so that you can get out of the shit. But people take it to an extreme when they say stuff like, well, let me just read this paragraph. Let's say, for example, that your story is that you're depressed. Chances are pretty good that even though it feels awful, when you feel awful, you don't have to work hard or do the laundry or go to the gym. It also feels very familiar and cozy and comfortable. It gets you attention. People come in and check on you and sometimes bring food. Blech. It gives you something to talk about. It allows you to not try too hard or move forward and face possible failure. It lets you drink beer for breakfast. Do you think she offers good strategies for combating depression? No. She basically is of the camp that says, just don't be depressed.
I wish I'd known how comfortable I was when I was chronically depressed.
I know. I love that stage in depression where you're just exhausted all the time. I love that.
Yeah.
Because, I love naps.
Because when you're in your bed, unable to get up, it's so snuggly and warm and comfy. You're just like, I'm going to stay here.
Yeah. And then when your child is desperately trying to cheer you up, and then it's making them sad that they can't cheer you up, and it's making them depressed, and it's like, you know what, I love this. I love this story. This is my favorite bedtime story. Read to me harder, daddy. It's like, people who say this drive me crazy, and that
and a lot of people think because they've been sad sometimes, I've been depressed and I got out of it. It's like,
so congratulations, Becky.
Shut your mouth and go get a degree.
Yeah.
Before you talk to me.
Yeah. Go get a degree and fucking off.
Yeah. Don't worry, they got
an E-tag.
They got PhDs in fucking off. Well, they got PhDs in pissing me off.
Yeah, I don't have a PhD, but I do have chronic CBF. Okay. This idea that anything negative that happens to you is something that you are attracting because you are vibrating at a low frequency. Ooh.
I kind of prefer it when it vibrates at a higher, just deeper. The amount they talked about
explicit
vibrating.
Content.
I just couldn't.
What's your thought on this whole idea of vibration and frequency, especially as it comes up in law of attraction stuff?
I think that they heard sometime in school about atoms having vibrations.
Yeah.
And have merged it into some idea, or they're getting particle waves. I don't know. It's pseudoscience. You know, you pick a little piece out and you turn it into a story.
Yeah.
To make your worldview fit.
Yeah.
A liquid, the atoms are moving faster than in a solid, and if you get down to like absolute zero or whatever, most particles will be at an almost stationary. I'm not amazing at my scientific theories, as you can tell. I'm a little rusty, but I don't know what they're getting at.
Well, this is the thing. It's like when people talk about vibration and frequency from a like self-development perspective, a lot of the times they can't explain the science behind it. Or they'll pick out the science-y words and then claim to be experts on the whole idea.
Yeah.
But when you get down to the root of where these things actually come from, it goes through all of these filters that then a lot of people have co-opted and like, so because everything has a vibration and everything has a frequency, supposedly, that's definitely why you need to buy my essential oils from my MLM. That's definitely why you need these magical NASA stickers, because it'll adjust your frequencies to the right station.
Yeah. And
it's like, no.
Like, they don't even try to make it make sense. Like, she just says words. And I'm like, okay, please explain. And she's just like, I don't know. I just don't know where to go with that, other than if you want to believe it, you'll make it fit.
Yes, yes. And I think that's also how she approaches the whole idea of manifestation. Mm-hmm. She uses it a lot. She says, manifest this, manifest that. She doesn't explain how it's supposed to work. She touches on it a little bit, and it's clear that she has read a lot of self-help stuff. Mm-hmm. It is clear that she has consumed a lot of the content, but then what she actually offers us isn't any new insights into these concepts. It's just repackaging things in a slightly more frustrating way, because it's like, oh, well, if I put the word badass on the cover, that's what's going to sell books. And she's a New York Times best-selling author.
You know what this book makes me think?
What's that?
That she built a good network of people in positions of power or influence. And she was talking about this stuff and her coaching stuff that she was doing, and people were buying whatever she was selling, and they said, hey, if you write a book, we can get you like all this money. So she sat down and just like spewed whatever the fuck she could into it, with very little actual thought to sit down and make sure all the ideas connect and make sense.
Well, I mean, in the book, she talks about, like, as she was doing the self-development work, joining, like, these business groups and these think tanks and understanding these things, and then eventually becoming a coach. And the way it's written about in here, I don't have the exact page on me, so whatever, feeds into one of the things that people really don't like about coaches. That so many of them, especially in the business world, start these coaching businesses where they're coaching potential coaches to become coaches for other coaches.
Yeah.
That's why it all can seem like a giant pyramid scheme.
Because it is.
In those contexts,
in those
yes.
Contexts, yeah. That's one of the things that stood out to me. It was early in the book. She said, I was one of these suckers spending all this money on personal coaches. And then like a paragraph later or two, she's like, so I became a coach. And the logical explanation for that is all my clients are suckers. You can't have it both ways.
I think for someone to build a client base on this kind of thinking that's outlined in this book, there has to be a degree of cognitive dissonance. There has to be a degree of like shutting off those critical thinking skills and going, you know what? what you're saying makes sense. I'm going to hand over my brain and my ability to detect bullshit over to you, because you talk and think like an expert, because you're repackaging all this stuff that's already been talked about a lot. And on the subject of suckers, on chapter 20, titled Fear is for Suckers, it perpetuates this language that's being used against people who haven't achieved #success. Mm-hmm. It's all of this dismissive, at times degrading language on people who seem to fear money. We'll talk about money shortly, or her perspectives on money shortly. But I want to share this little anecdote about fear for her. So this takes place in New Mexico, and that breaks my heart because, someone I love lives in New Mexico, and I'm like, stay out of New Mexico. So when she lived in New Mexico, she went with a friend to a cave in one of the local mountain ranges. Yeah. And she wasn't really interested because she's not that into caves, but she went anyway because she wanted to do some other things around that. Mm-hmm. Okay. After a glorious drive beneath the endless New Mexico sky and a beautiful hike on a red dirt path through a pinon pine forest, we got to the cave. She capitalizes that. It was just as she'd described, a little hole at the base of a small hill just big enough to crawl through. My friend tossed me a pair of knee pads and a flashlight and headed in. I followed her on my hands and knees, holding my flashlight with my teeth, and by the time we were about 10 minutes in, I felt like the entrance and my chances of ever seeing another burger again had vanished. If anything came at us from inside the cave, like, say, a monster, or if there was a flash flood, or an earthquake, or a rattlesnake, or a mosquito, we were totally screwed. The craggy white rock tunnel surrounding us had closed in so tightly that when my friend finally stopped crawling and leaned against the wall to it, she had to do so with her head bent so far forward it looked like she was about to start chewing on her neck. I had trouble visualizing that, I'll be honest with you. Like, I'm trying to do it now. I just feel like I'm shoving my boobs in my face. What the hell was I doing there again? Okay, now for the cool part. You ready? She asked. I don't know why I put on my Rachel Hollis voice for that, but I just did. Are you ready, girl? Girl, it's time to wash your face.
Because they were stupid enough to crawl into a cave that unprepared.
It's like that family in We're Going on a Bear Hunt.
Yeah.
It's like, you all are asking for trouble. Yeah. You're so ill-prepared. Anyway, so this friend said, turn off your light. Girl, turn off your light. She clicked off her flashlight after motioning for me to do the same. The instant my light went out, I experienced the absolute darkest darkness of beyond pitch black, holy fucking shit, deepest, darkest blackness ever. I felt the tickling of hysteria begin to worm its way up the back of my neck. And for the first time in my life, I completely understood fear. I want to unpack that last statement. For the first time in my life, I completely understood fear. If that ain't a sign of holy shit privilege, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
I went for a hike and crawled in a cave, and that's when I really understood what fear was.
Yeah, I don't know how you make it, let's just be generous and say 18 years without being truly afraid.
Yeah. And it's like, I do not vilify people who haven't experienced like crippling fear in their lives or who haven't been through like tremendous tragedies and traumas. I am not vilifying these people at all. That is wonderful. That is the kind of life that I want for everyone. Mm-hmm. But when you are in a position where you haven't had to go through those things, and then you're telling everyone else that they're just attracting the bad shit in their life, how dare you?
Yes.
That is my big question. How bloody dare you? Meka, can you tell me about a time in your youth where you felt true fear. Yeah.
Oh, no, the first time, it was when I was swimming and I was like 4, and 4 or 5, and my brother was 2, and my grandma decided to throw him over a wave because she was swimming with he was in floaties and he was 1 or 2.
Mm.
And then when we came up, he was like way out at sea. I know, in my little head he was. And I thought my brother was going to die. And my grandma was like trying to swim out to get him. And that was the first time I was like terrified.
That would be terrifying.
Yeah.
Anything where you feel like you're watching someone about to have their life not be like a thing anymore.
Basically the ocean. Because the ocean is incredibly dangerous. What about you? Like, when was the first time you can remember, or a specific time?
Oh my gosh. I feel like fear was just a standard part of so many aspects of my life growing up. One of my immediate thoughts is growing up in and out of Peru in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah.
So my family has a degree of political standing in Peru that has put us at risk of, well, when I say us, I'm referring specifically to my sister and me, and, my family as a whole, but I'm talking very specifically about my sister and me right now. Because we were also from the U.S., when we would come to Peru, we were constantly being targeted for ransom kidnappings.
Yeah, political pawns.
Yeah. When we had to fly from Lima to Cusco, if it was just a wait of like an hour or like, a couple of hours where we could sleep in the airport, then we would just do that. We would not leave the airport unless we absolutely had to. Because there were quite often people out there waiting for us. There was one incident that my mom has told me about a number of times where things would happen, or like we would get snatched up by people dressed as airport workers and taken to other parts of the airport for our own safety. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the faces you're making right now, Meka. There was a lot of terrorist activity happening in the 80s and the 90s in Peru, before Peru became nothing but an aesthetic and sacred cacao, which is like the same shit you can buy on every street corner in Cusco, but whatever. Anyway, it's a whole other discussion. This is one of the primary reasons that, and I know you've seen this as well, when we like go to a restaurant, a cafe or something, I need my back to a wall.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I didn't put that together.
I need to know that someone's not going to suddenly approach me from behind, snatch me up, throw me into a wheeling laundry bin to take us to a disused airplane hangar because there's like a group of radical terrorists and snipers with guns drawn outside the airport.
Yeah.
But there were times where like we did have to stay overnight, and we would travel between the airport and my uncle's house or the police barracks or my auntie's house in kind of like a mini motorcade type thing.
Yeah.
Like for our protection. And then once we got onto these properties, we did not leave these properties.
Yeah, right.
We just didn't. And then we would leave to get our next flight very, very early in the morning so that we could fly to Cusco.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, some other parts of that story I think I'm going to save for a footnote.
Yeah.
Because it can get pretty long-winded. But yes, So growing up, my big fears were terrorist kidnappings. The KKK was another. Like,
yeah, even the safe country that you lived in is actually a pretty terrifying place.
Yeah. It's like the summers that we would spend in Peru. One of my big fears going back home was like the racists. And yes, there weren't Klansmen around every corner in like the Lehigh Valley in suburban Pennsylvania, but like there were a lot of racists, and there's still like Klan activity not far from where my parents live, which has been bolstered by Trumpism. But, you know, I moved around a lot as a kid. There were a lot of incidents where we would move into a place and then the house would get tagged with like racist insignia, or like the cars would get marked up with swastikas and stuff. And it's like, it was clear that there were people who really did not want us there.
Yeah.
And they weren't always upfront about it. So we just had to kind of navigate that in a way that was very scary at times.
Why don't you just work your way up and become rich, because you'll be totally accepted into that new community?
Oh, yeah. That's the thing, too. Like, we had money.
Yeah. Like,
we just had the wrong color skin.
yeah. Like, your dad did everything right, went to uni and got his degree and became a professional, and you want to become part of that community, and everyone's like, you don't really belong here.
Yeah. You're taking away all our jobs. It's like, oh, sorry. Did you apply for that like high level structural engineering job that my dad ended up getting? It's like, no. It's like, well, shut up then.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. So this is all about fear, right?
Yeah.
Some people fear breaking a friggin' nail. Whereas some people's fears are like, I have a chronic disease that could kill me in my sleep and my family will be without me. Or I am in a country that is continuously being bombed because we've been displaced and pushed into this so-called safe zone in an apartheid system. And now when the sun is shining, that's when the drones can find us and bomb us out of existence. Like that's what fear is. And again, I don't want to invalidate other people's sense of fear. But what I'm trying to say is that if we don't recognize the inherent privileges that some of us have in terms of what we get to fear, we can't tell people, oh, just stop attracting those bombs. Stop attracting that apartheid. Stop attracting the genocide. It's like, shut the F up.
I mean, even just the difference between my childhood and your childhood, like from my very privileged position, the things I feared were not anywhere near as like immediate and dangerous. And I recognize that. Like, I did have a very good childhood in the grand scheme of things. Like, even the bad things that happened are very minimal compared to what a lot of people go through. And I don't take that at face value. Like, it has made a big difference.
Yeah. And I've spoken before about, like, the level of privilege that I have had in my life in terms of having educated parents who are still married to each other and, you know, had, like, that whole, like, nuclear family thing. And had money, had the means to not have to worry about being educated and going to uni and things like that, which is a tremendous privilege. And I recognize that. And I would never tell someone, and this is kind of transitioning a bit into how the author writes about money, I would never tell someone that the reason they don't have money is just a mindset problem.
Yeah.
I hate when people do that. When people say things like, the difference between poor people and rich people is their mindset. I'm like, oh, really? Really? And I'm a mindset coach. That's a huge aspect of my coaching practice. But we can't keep saying that, like, ignore the systemic issues. Just shift your mindset. Where mindset has a place in this discussion, I believe, is in how you navigate the systemic or the hierarchical systems within your workplace that you need to navigate in order to get to where you want to be professionally or personally, right? I don't believe that mindset isn't a big part of it, but we need to stop weaponizing this word against people and acting like it's just this catch-all for like, just be better.
Yeah. Yep.
It can be really easy for people to encounter certain obstacles and then go, oh shit, this is too hard. And it's like, okay, well, stop for a minute. What is hard? You know? It's like, what are the actual obstacles in place here? Who are the people who are either real or perceived gatekeepers in this scenario? What kind of communication strategies are impacting the progression through whatever it is you need to progress through? But also, what actually needs to change in society in order for people to not have to exist in systemic cycles of poverty?
Yeah.
You can't just tell people like, oh, I can't afford rent. Choose better great-grandparents.
It's even just the difference between America and here. I could not choose to take a risk of quitting your job and doing like opening a nail salon because then I got no health care.
Yeah.
If I fail, what are the systems to pick you up? You have some limited social services there, but very limited. Here, I know that there is backups. There's support for small business owners. There's always healthcare available, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But certainly emergencies and acute illnesses. That's just like the privilege difference between a person in Australia versus America.
Yeah. That is honestly one of the reasons that I have not lived in that country since I left for good. It's so much harder in those kinds of systems to have control over your own destiny.
Well, also...
Or you can't even leave an abusive job because then you'll lose your health care. But that's why the workplace culture is so crap over there.
Talking about mindset, though, there's a whole lot of Americans who think they live in the best country in the world. Their mindset is that I live in a world of opportunity and best country ever.
Yeah.
And yet they're still in desperate poverty.
Yes. Yes.
So
I'll be rich someday.
So why is it not coming to them? Why is their mindset not fixed all their problems?
Yeah. Don't know.
They keep voting for the people that keeping them there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. You're right. In a lot of ways, it's like, I know you mean voting politically, but in a way, like voting even economically with their money, with, the authors that they're following. People are like voting with their dollars for people who are telling them, you're the problem. It's not the system, it's you. It's like, oh, okay, tell me more. It's like, because my behaviors and things like that are things that I can control, so I'm going to assume all the control and all the responsibility in this situation. I'm going to blame myself, and I'm going to burn myself out. And not only that, I'm going to be vitriolic against other people in my situation as well. And if I do happen to break through, if I do happen to find myself in a place where I can not just survive, but thrive, everyone behind me is a loser.
Yeah.
Or in her words, lame.
Lame.
Yeah, she uses that word like so many times in this book. I'm like, okay. There's a lot of stuff in here that's written very much as absolutes. And anyone who's not succeeding, again, is a victim. This whole victim mindset thing that gets thrown around all willy-nilly without in it needs to be scrutinized a lot more when it comes up.
Yeah.
It's like, if you actually fight back against something, somehow you're a victim. It's like, no.
I mean, there's something to be said for being too far either direction again, too. Like, you can give up and not... Like, you live in an unfair piece of shit world, sure. But, like, you can choose the small decisions to try and make it a little bit better.
Yes.
But you're not going to fix everything that way.
Yeah.
Do the best with what you got, you know? But it's not going to fix everything, and we have to fight as a community to try and do that. But you, in that position, probably don't have the power to change it.
Yeah.
It requires us all to take that view.
Yeah, community support. Yeah. On page 179, in the chapter titled Millions of Mirrors, she writes, when you find yourself dealing with someone who irritates you, and you find yourself getting gossipy, finger-pointy, judgy, complainy, rising up and confronting the situation can do a hell of a lot more than just making your life more pleasant in the long run. It can help you heal and grow and get out of victim mode, because it forces you to deal with the gnarlier aspects of yourself, the parts that make you not so proud. None of us care to admit that we're dishonest, conceited, insecure, unethical, mean, bossy, stupid, lazy, etc., but that's what attracted you to the people you notice it in, and them to you, in the first place. And admitting it is the first step in letting it go. Whee! So you attracted those people that are pissing you off because you have those qualities within yourself.
I was actually envisioning like a activism group or something. They're like, look at all those people that believe in victimhood. Like, see, they attract each other. They just think that yeah. That was what I envisioned while you were reading that.
Well, yeah, it's like what we were talking about in the Tony Robbins episode about I am not your guru. You know, his whole thing about the Me Too movement and victimhood and all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, nah, dude. So some of the other things in this chapter are around, like, having a community around you of the people that you want to be more like. And it's like, okay, sure, fair enough, I like that. But the way it's kind of folded back in on itself as like, if you don't like something about your life, surround yourself with the people who are living the kind of life you like. Make sure that they abuse the hell out of you so that it gives you the kick up the backside to actually become more like them. But be yourself because you are a badass. It's like, what's going on, Jen?
But then she also said in one part that don't surround yourself with people that make you feel bad. It'll just bring you down and make you depressed.
Yeah.
So
well, she also says that your reality is what you focus on creates your reality, right?
Yeah.
So on page 177, she writes, your reality is created by what you focus on and how you choose to interpret it. There's that whole perception thing again. This goes for everything, including the things you focus on about the people in your world. For example, depending on who you are, you could react in myriad ways to your new boyfriend or girlfriend constantly referring to you as the giant dumbass. You could A, see this as a red flag and think they're a bully. B, see this as a red flag and think they're nervous or insecure and have terrible manners. C, see this as a green light because they are in so much pain that they need to abuse other people. They really need someone as understanding as I am. Apparently that's a green light in her world. D, see this as a green light because you believe that you are, in fact, a giant dumbass. What? Or E, think it's hilarious because it doesn't resonate with you. What happened to option F? Recognize this as emotional abuse and just end that relationship.
Wasn't that the first option? Like, it's just a red flag because they're a piece of crap?
Well, it's like they're a bully, well, but it's like
that's a nice way of putting they're an abusive piece of shit.
Yeah, but these all these other examples are about like, okay, let's just ignore what's actually happening here and just choose to see it differently. Maybe you are a giant dumbass. It's like,
I think like that was all said, like these are things you shouldn't think, because obviously the answer is the vibrations, because it's always about the vibrations.
oh yeah, it's the vibrations, Marky Mark.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what they mean, but I'm sure it was the vibrations.
Yeah.
Vibrations in relationships always helps.
Sometimes they're even better than real human relationships. And this is why I put the E tag on this episode. So there's a lot of like, just change yourself. Like, surround yourself with the kind of people you want to be like, but ultimately just change yourself. Just change yourself. Just choose to have more money. Choose to be the kind of person who can afford the Audi when you should be buying the Honda. Like, yeah, I want to talk about this whole little car story that she presented as like a money mindset thing.
I just want to say,
Yeah.
I do truly think one of the big issues with us not making like big systemic changes that needs to happen is because of exactly that. People choose to surround themselves with those that confirm their worldview. It's very confronting to go and see someone else's world and see their lives and realize that things are much more complex and everyone wants it to be fit in a tidy box, and it doesn't. And that's confronting, so you retreat to your comfort zone. And as much as they say push yourself out of your comfort zone in these things, what they mean is within the bigger box that you live inside.
Yes.
It's a nesting doll of comfort zones.
Yeah. It's an expensive nesting doll of comfort zones, because this is another thing that drives debt culture, especially in places like the United States. It's a thing that drives the predatory nature of multi-level marketing. It's, no. I choose to identify as this person who has lots and lots of money and can make the kinds of decisions that will allow me to afford this car that I really shouldn't be buying in the first place. It's like, no. When you have a choice to make between the thing that is actually within your means financially and the thing that is well out of your means financially, you go get that more expensive thing. Like, she actively encourages people to do this. Get a credit card, borrow money from friends and family, get a loan from the bank. If that doesn't work, manifest the money in some other way. Again, she doesn't go into detail about how to manifest this money in some other way, but here's another great example of her thinking in this regard. In the Money, Your New Best Friend chapter, she writes, "Make it urgent." Brace yourself, Meka. Ever notice how when your rent is due in a week and you have no idea how you're going to pay it, or if you really need a specific amount of money for a specific urgent purpose, like getting a throbber of a rotten tooth pulled, that you always manage to somehow figure out how to get the money just in time? Usually, a check that you had forgotten about arrives in the mail, or an unexpected freelance job comes in, or you suddenly develop the nerve to ask somebody for a loan, or you sell grandma's jewelry, or you compete with the 5-year-old selling lemonade down the street and make a killing. What? You shift from wasting your time whining and worrying because you're suddenly too busy making it happen. This is the power of clarity, urgency, and not screwing around. So, Meka, you ever notice how when you have an urgent payment you need to make, suddenly the money just kind of, you just kind of find the money to pay it?
I mean, yes, and that's because I come from privilege. Draw on your network. Go into debt because you know you have the safety net of people around you that could possibly help you get out of it. run an illegal business because, you know, the cops won't pick on you because you're white.
Yeah.
Lemonade stand. Need a food license here.
Yeah. I think she's trying to be funny when she mentions the compete with a 5-year-old selling lemonade thing, but man, that's dark.
I do feel like she doesn't see how complicated running businesses is in a world that actually has like laws and regulations and paperwork and taxes and a government.
Yeah. And it's so tone deaf because it's like, okay, Jen, you know what happens to a lot of people when they can't find the money to pay for these things that they urgently need to pay for? They end up in severe debt. They end up filing for bankruptcy. For some people, they are imprisoned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is insane to me that we still imprison people for debt.
One thing that comes to mind for me immediately is like the bail system, for example. Like, let's say you're charged with something and a bail amount is set. It's like, okay, well, if you've got the money to pay the bail, you can go hang out at home until your court date. Don't leave because someone's going to find you and they're going to, like, you know, cause trouble. If you don't have the money immediately on hand to pay that bail amount, you are stuck being incarcerated until this date before you've been found guilty of anything. And I mean, like, John Oliver did a whole report on the like bail system as well, and we can put a link to that in the show notes, and how situations like that severely disadvantaged people from low socioeconomic backgrounds, many of which, especially in the US, are like communities of color as well. This smacks of The Secret. We have yet to do our big episode about The Secret, but trust me, it is coming.
My teeth need a break. I'm going to go get a new grind plate fitted just for reading these books.
Oh, but these books are about grinding. You gotta grind. It's all about joining the grind.
The grind's like...
Rise and grind, Meka.
I do.
She continues. The money is there if you really, truly desire it. It's just a matter of being so serious about it that you don't stray from the path of manifesting it, no matter what gets thrown in it. I understand how people can take messages like that and go, you know what? I'm inspired. I'm going to keep my eyes on the prize, keep my eyes on the goal of making a certain amount of money by a certain amount of time, and I'm going to create an action plan for how that's going to happen. And I appreciate when that's the kind of thing that invigorates people towards taking the action they need to take. But this is another way in which manifestation, I think, has been misused in a lot of cases. The idea of a more active form of manifestation, I can have a lot more respect for. Because it's like, okay, having that strong visual, if that's what you need, of what it is you're trying to achieve. Yeah. Letting that drive you, letting that light that fire in you that's going to say, that's where I'm going. And nothing's going to stop me.
Do you know?
And this is how I'm going to drive that change. But with a lot of people who are into law of attraction, especially when it comes to money, it's almost an insult to ask the universe or to try to figure out the how. Because that's the universe's job. Don't worry about the how. The universe will take care of it. You just have to want it enough.
Do you know what actually pushed me to come out and start transitioning? I met this old man. I went to go pick up a something from Marketplace off, and he was just living the life I wanted. And I suddenly realized, like, oh, I don't want to grow up to be an old lady. I want to grow up to be an old man and retire and be on a little property in the bush and just be an old man. And so my vision is growing old into who I want to be. And that was just like, that was my thing to manifest. So I then started looking into what steps I could take to get there.
Oh.
And that's where it can be useful.
I love that.
You just need a vision to work towards. And even if it's not where you eventually go, it helps guide.
Yeah. If you find some really sexy side quest along the way that then kind of changes the direction, but it still aligns with your core values,
Yeah.
then that's pretty awesome too. Mm-hmm. But one way in which she villainizes people without money is by constantly suggesting that the people who don't have money are afraid of money because money is supposedly evil. Money is for people who are greedy. Money is the enemy in some way. And it's like, no, Jen, no. That's not why people don't have more money. It's not because it's like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like money.
I think she's misreading the whole eat the rich thing. The idea is, if you don't share, we're going to have to eat you. Not that we're afraid of your money.
Yeah. Because there are people out there who are grinding their asses off, so to speak. Mm-hmm. They want the money. They want the things that money will provide for them. They want to be able to have a cup of coffee every now and then without worrying about how much it's going to eat into their savings. Mm-hmm. You know, they want to be able to go on vacations. They want to be able to have enough so that they can then give some to other people who are in need. Mm-hmm. Even in some of the YouTube videos that I tortured myself by watching of her talking about money, it's very much like, oh, think about all the good things money can do. It's like, okay, tick, what's next? And there's a big difference between choosing to live a frugal kind of artisty life that she kind of describes as when she talks about her losery life before she decided, you know what, I actually like money. There's a big difference between choosing that kind of lifestyle and having it kind of thrust upon you. Big difference. Yeah. And I'm a very financially anxious person, but I have money.
Yeah.
I have a weird relationship with money. I grew up with parents who, you know, went through cycles of poverty. Mm-hmm. And it has impacted some of my views around money.
Yeah.
But it also has me in a position of great privilege in terms of finances. Mm-hmm. So I could never say to someone that like, poverty is a choice. You're just not working hard enough.
Yeah.
People with money can take more risks than people who don't have money. People with money can try and fail and try and fail and try and fail without ending up in severe debt, whereas people who don't have money can't do that.
Yeah.
And it's not because they think people with money are greedy.
I was going to say, just growing up, seeing the vast differences in people's life that money affects, where we were the rich ones and yet actually not particularly wealthy at that time. You just kind of, when you do get further up in your life and have a little more money, you still think to yourself like, oh, well, I still have plenty. I don't need the top, like everything. It's not that I need to be as skimpy as I used to, and I certainly will buy better brands of like nicer foods or healthier, you know. Yeah, I just think it's always in the back of my mind that there's other people there that still are in need, so that's not my main focus, is just gaining money.
Yeah. Like, there are other things that come with that. And another really tone-deaf bit in here that just really helps to kind of package her overall idea of how to get out of poverty is here. On page 220, she writes, "A great way to psych yourself into up-leveling is by raising your bottom line. So often, we take the massive leaps of faith only when we have to, when we need to put out some sort of fire, aka pay off some huge bill. Because this is about changing you, not just about changing your income. Why not decide to be the kind of person who always has a certain amount of money in the bank? Be someone who's not in struggle and panic and constantly behind the 8 ball. Come up with a figure and decide your account will never go below it. Make it non-negotiable. For example, if you decide that you will always have $2,000 in your checking account and refuse to see your balance go under it, it will light the fire under your ass to generate income the second you get close to dipping below it. Now, Meka, I can tell you from experience, I've done this. And it wasn't because I was trying to up-level. It's because of my financial anxiety. Historically, it never mattered how much money I was making. It never mattered how steady my income was. There was always this of okay, if my bank account dips below this certain number, even if it's a very healthy number, it's I could kind of visualize, and I said this to my psychologist a couple of years ago, it's I visualize this vault opening and a big gust of wind coming in, and all of my money is just flying out of this vault. Mm-hmm. And that's driven by a lot of things. Some of it could be pathology, but a lot of it is also, I think about, my parents, and there are people I care about who are in the US. If some sudden giant expense comes up and I'm the only one who can save them and I don't have the money, it's going to be oh shit. And of course, that's a tricky story that I'm telling myself, because realistically, I'm not going to be anyone's only way out of a life or death situation. But there are a lot of traumatic reasons that have led to this weird relationship with money. And it is something I'm working on. Mm-hmm. It is, but it's not as simple as saying, why not choose to have a certain amount of money in the bank? It's okay, here's another reason this book doesn't really hold up in today's economy. Because a lot of people are just struggling to get out of debt. The idea of even having savings to draw upon is out of reach for a lot of people. And sure, some people will find strategies and will find ways to get out of that. And some people, a lot of people will be putting strategies in place to work their way out of those things. And there are a lot of industries and programs set up to help people do that. Mm-hmm. But people are going to reach different levels of financial security at different rates in different circumstances because of things that aren't always in their control as well. And we can't pretend that it's just because they don't want it badly enough.
Yeah. I was going to say, with ADHD, I can do two extremes. Complete, just don't touch money, skimp everything, try and just live off the bones of your ass, or I just can't think about it and I just spend, and it does just waft out of my bank account.
Yeah.
And so, I want to be in the middle. I want to be able to just slowly and sensibly, but I just have to kind of, either defer to someone else to completely control my financial situation, or do one of those two extremes.
Yeah, I mean, just be neurotypical. Be someone who doesn't have mental health problems. Be someone who doesn't have generational trauma and chronic fatigue and other things that are impacting their ability to thrive. Mm-hmm. And then your problems will be solved.
Yeah. For me right now, it's the fatigue of how much energy it takes to think about money.
Yeah. It's not something I love talking about.
No. No, and these books so often are so focused on that.
Yeah.
And it is kind of difficult sometimes when you've got stuff that's stressing you out on that side of things, and I have had the same stuff going on in my world too.
Yeah.
I'm in a little moment of relief at the moment because I don't have to think about it right now.
Mm. So much to unpack here, and as usual, haven't even scratched the surface of everything that is wrong with a lot of the messaging in this book, even though there are some really good things in here, some good takeaways that have been repeated over and over again in various personal development content, the underlying source energy behind all of this is just grim. And if you don't believe me, under resources, one of the books that she has listed here, the final one, the headliner on this list, a book that we talked extensively about in one of our earliest episodes of this podcast, The Way of the Superior Man, a spiritual guide to mastering the challenges of women, work, and sexual desire by David Data. If you haven't listened to that episode, I strongly recommend you go back and listen to it. Okay, I'm not going to read you her whole review about it, but she raves about it. She says, like, it's for men, but ladies, you have to read it too. You'll understand men so much better. Like, you'll understand why it's okay for men to lust after their 18-year-old babysitters. Oh, that book it gives me the ick. Anyway, so we've talked about the law of attraction. We've talked about money. We've talked about manifestation, the whole concept of vibrations and frequency. We've talked about the role of privilege in all of this as well. And I feel like we still haven't gotten to the core of what it actually takes to be a badass. So I'm going to ask you, Meka, if the key to being a badass isn't manifestation and affirmations and blaming ourselves for not wanting money enough, what is the key to being a badass? Especially for people from marginalized communities.
I think the fact that you are still here, you're still kicking, you're still lifting your head up, that makes you a fucking badass already. You've survived so much. You have started from a place so far back to others, and yet you still come each day and face the world. It's not fair that you had to be forged in fire, but that's where you gain your strength. You've been refined.
Yeah.
You have every reason to see the bad in the world. And this is where your attitude comes in. It's not going to magically bring things to you. But seeing the opportunity in what you have seen and been through gives you like this compassion and perspective and skills that you can now use to start shaping the world into what you want, little chip by chip.
Yeah.
But if all of us are sitting here chipping away at that stone, we're eventually going to get somewhere, even though I know it doesn't feel that way. But my perspective is that the smallest achievement that might seem in your life like nothing compared to others, don't compare yourself to others.
Yeah.
That in perspective to what you've done is amazing. And you need to give yourself credit for that.
Yeah.
And we're not here to be this like top tier class system, like amazing guru. We can't all just do the pyramid scheme of becoming these self-help gurus, right?
Yep.
We're here to work together to make life just a little bit better for the person next to us.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude change that has helped me so much. I might not change the world, but I might change the world for one other person. That's all I need.
Yeah.
And that might be your kid. That might be your friend. It might just be a stranger who you are able to say kind words to in a day that has been terrible.
Yeah.
And it's true, it happens all the time. It's happened to me. One small thing that happened in my life has changed it on multiple occasions. And that's, I think, makes you a badass.
Yes.
You already are. You just
Yes.
have to see it.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you, Meka.
Got all teared up.
Me too. Damn you. You cut onion, you.
What about you, Leslie? What's your view on it?
Well, I think part of it is that one of the first things you need to do is really get clear on what you actually value and not just what society is telling you to value. And sometimes that can feel like a threat to the identity that you've taken on for yourself or that you've been living in for as long as you can remember. And that can feel a little bit scary, but that's okay. Your fear is valid, but by dissecting that fear and kind of looking around on the insides and seeing what's there, you can find strengths that you can then draw upon to build the life that you want for yourself and for your community. Because community is really important here. And that will take mindset work as well at times, but it's the kind of mindset work that we can fortify ourselves with to find the opportunities to change the systems that we're living under as well. Because that way, as we're finding our own clarity, our own successes, that can also help to forge clearer paths for everyone who comes after us or everyone who's walking alongside us. So it's important to not let any of these wellness and success gurus gaslight you into thinking that you're the problem and that everything that's happening that's wrong in your life is because you're attracting it energetically and it has nothing to do with your circumstances. Circumstances in some cases can be overcome with a lot of work, but when people in the self-help world talk about this, they don't dive into what it actually takes. They just go, oh, yep, no, it's just you. Just change your own behaviors. Anyway, so combating all of this, it may take a bit of sass, it may take some audacity. One thing that it will take is commitment.
Yep.
And you can do it.
Yeah.
That's what's going to make you feel more like a badass. And speaking of badasses, Meka, you've brought us a quote from an amazing badass.
Yep. Malala Yousafzai. So if you've not heard, she's an amazing, still quite young woman who was outspoken about the bullshit going on in her community, where the Taliban were banning girls from going to school. Her father was also an activist, and she didn't care how dangerous it was. She still spoke up.
Yeah.
And in response, she was shot in the face by the Taliban. And you know what she did? She didn't run away from it. She kept speaking up.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like the baddest of badasses ever.
Yeah.
I don't know many people more badass than that.
Yeah.
So this quote, I'm not the most spiritual person at all. So that part I struggle with. But this is from someone who does see God in it all. And so her quote, once I had asked God for 1 or 2 extra inches in height, but instead he made me as tall as the sky, so high that I could not measure myself. By giving me this height to reach people, he has also given me great responsibilities.
I love that.
I by no means think that I stand anywhere up on the stage next to Malala, but...
Oh, Rachel Hollis would think she does.
And now, Leslie.
Yeah.
Where can people find us if they want to connect?
Instagram, Leslie V Coaching, LESLIE. And my website, leslievcoaching.com. That'll link you to all of our podcast episodes, all of my social media stuff, and also a link to book a free life coaching session with me.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming back from America, Meka.
Don't worry, I was keen to get home.
not just the United States, because you were in Canada as well. I don't call the United States America as a whole. That's a whole other discussion. Anyway, I'm glad you're back from that side of the world. I really missed you.
Missed you too.
Yeah. And thank you so much to our listeners who have been very patiently, or maybe impatiently, I don't know, waiting for us to get back into our book-specific content. Really appreciate you, and we'll see you in our next episode.